Hey everyone, John here, and the Ask the Developer article for Mario Kart World is live, and there's so many cool things in here, lots of peeks behind the curtain and just talking about the development of this game. And one thing I am surprised that they talked about is why Switch 1 didn't have a Mario Kart of its own, because this game here was essentially the Switch's Mario Kart. So what happened? Were they making one in the life cycle? And the answer to that is yes, Mario Kart World. Mario Kart World started development, prototypes began in March 2017. So we are talking as soon as the Switch launched, prototypes began, and the development stuck on Switch 1 for a very long time. This game was in development for around 8 years, and it only moved to Switch 2 in 2020. Yabuki says, "We were thinking about what to do for the next Mario Kart even during the development of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and we began prototyping in March 2017. It was at the end of the year when we officially started work on it as a project. I felt that in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, we were able to perfect the formula that we'd been following in the series to that point, where players race on individual courses. That's why this time we wanted the gameplay to involve players driving around a large world, and we began creating a world map like this. And this is the map of Mario Kart World." And when asked why isn't this called Mario Kart 9, they basically said that the idea for an open world game was the forefront of this title, that they weren't going to be following the same formula as past Mario Kart games, and so the title Mario Kart World was decided on really early. In fact, there's a prototype logo here, which looks very similar to the old Gradient Mario Kart logo that you'd find in like Double Dash. At the time, we were developing Mario Kart World for Nintendo Switch, and we were analyzing from a calm and collective programming perspective whether it would be possible to accommodate 24 players. In game development, you first finish making all the different elements and then optimize them to run on the system. But when trying to accommodate 24 players, we had all kinds of processing optimizations right from the start as we were making it. When we were developing for the Nintendo Switch system, it was difficult for us to incorporate everything we wanted, so we were always conscious of what we were giving up in return. We discussed things like toning down the visuals, lowering the resolution, and we even considered dropping the frame rate to 30 FPS in some cases. It was a tough decision. The interviewer says, "So what did you decide to give up on in the end?" And Sato says, "Well..." And Jikimaru says, "We couldn't give up on anything." And then everyone laughs. Yabuki says, "We worked on it while kicking the can down the road in terms of deciding what to give up on. So at some point we knew it was going to get messy. But we decided to release the Mario Kart 8 Booster Course Pass. We thought this would give us a bit more time to continue development." That's when the conversation of moving it to Nintendo Switch 2 system came up, and this suddenly opened up a bunch of possibilities on what we could do. It truly was a ray of hope. Sato says, "Yabuki-san first brought this up in 2020. Back then, we already had an idea of the next system's expected specs, but it wasn't until a bit later that we actually received working development units. Until then, we just had to proceed with development based on provisional estimates. When we were developing for Nintendo Switch, we often worried about whether we could find the right balance between planning and performance. Of course, the Switch system's performance is sufficient for developing different kind of games, but if we had included everything we wanted to do in this vast world, then it wouldn't have run at 60 FPS, and we'd have suffered from constant frame drops. I think there were a lot of people on the team who were worried about whether we could actually manage it, but once we decided to release the game for Switch 2, we expected our worries to evaporate all at once. I remember being overjoyed when I discovered we could express even more than we'd originally set out to do." Ishikawa continues, "Of course the graphics needed to be more detailed, but like Sato-san, I also felt it was outweighed by the sense of relief. From the beginning, the designers were saying they wanted to make the art richer, so I thought we could achieve that now. For example, team members who were creating the terrain and the scenery were really happy because they could now place more trees, which were key to giving the world a more natural look. And speaking of the visuals, they wanted the overall tone and energy to match the box art for Super Mario Kart. And there's actually a demonstration here about how Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Mario and team and his karts are more sleek and edged, whereas in Mario Kart World, it's more playful, more rounded, more bouncy. And when it comes to the soundtrack, first fellas, listen to this. Asahi says, altogether, they've arranged over 200 songs for the jukebox. These are all brand new arrangements, and we did live recordings. We prepared pieces from quite a wide variety of musical genres. I believe those who are well versed in video game music, as well as those who aren't, will all enjoy these. And by the way, they name drop one of the best tracks in Mario Kart history. Listen here. We recorded a band arrangement for the staff credits theme from Mario Kart DS in a style that fits this new game, and I personally was really moved when listening to it when driving around during the game's evening scenes. You can enjoy it even without knowing the original tracks, but I think someone with fond memories of playing various Super Mario games will feel a wave of nostalgia listening to these tunes when they drive around. Now, something that came up online a lot from people is whether it's even fun to drive from point A to point B. When you finish a track, is it fun to drive to the next track? And they address this. Jikimaru says, for example, when going from point A to point B, we tried placing lots of bends along the way, like we always do. But with so many bends, you lose sight of your destination. Then your goal of traveling from point A to point B becomes more difficult. That said, driving for ages down a straight road isn't much fun either. So we figured out we were lacking some kind of gameplay mechanic for straight roads, and that's where the idea of the game's new elements, such as rail ride and wall ride, came from. The development team collectively referred to these new features as tricks. If everywhere's just straight roads, it's going to feel the same no matter where you drive. And with such a vast world, we thought it'd be a shame if you were just driving in a straight line the whole time. Then we found a hint from a book that said, skateboards create infinite possibilities in a city with single pieces of wood. Tricks can open up a multitude of driving possibilities for just a single wall or dirt track. We thought it'd be fun just to be able to drive in completely different ways just based on the player's imagination. So we made the gameplay more varied. For tricks like rail ride and the wall ride, we referenced extreme sports like skateboarding, snowboarding, and BMX. I think these tricks will really give players a chance to use their imagination as they come up with new ideas, like, I'm going to drive up this wall, let me use that pillar, or can I ride on the guardrail or power line? And fellas, this right here is official art. This is a real piece of art they made for the game. And this was when pitching other NPC characters to be actual racers, so the cow. And they thought after looking at this image, it actually looks very natural. And that's what spurred so many just regular Mario enemies and Mario background characters from being actual playable characters. And you may have seen in Mario Kart World, when it comes to the water, you now ride on it, rather than under it like Mario Kart 7 and Mario Kart 8. And it seems a bit like Wave Race, right? That's intentional. So this is what Sato says right here. Yes, since you drive on the water, we put a lot of effort into the wave graphics, not just how they look. Our up-and-coming programmers also implemented simulations such as ripples spreading when something drops in the water, or waves appearing after a vehicle passes through. They made it possible to create waves on demand. The game has enemy characters that create waves when they attack, so we were able to incorporate players jumping on those waves into the gameplay. And then Jikimaru says, racing on water is something this game has in common with Wave Race 64. Well, actually they say the Wave Race 64 game because of course this is Nintendo. There are various more things they bring up, like how the day and night cycle was very difficult to implement, especially with the weather systems, and we get a look at some concept art showing what the game will look like at different points in the day. We designed it so that a day in the game passes in around 24 minutes. You easily get a sense of how time passes in the game, since it happens faster than in real life, but the time doesn't progress evenly, does it? At first, we made the colors of the sky gradually change over time, but in many cases, we considered the time and scenery together. For example, we wanted players to be able to experience the desert at night. In this case, when there's a particular scene we really want players to see, we didn't think that such a feature would work, as players might just drive through the location at a rather bland time between evening and night. So I discussed this issue with the programmers, and we decided to focus on the most appealing times of day and dramatically shorten the transitions between day and night. So it's definitely very controlled on what they think looks the best, and not necessarily a complete cycle, but very interesting though. There's tons more concept art here and a lot more smaller things to read. Also, you can place stickers that you earn from the open world on your cart, which I don't remember if they've said that before, but yeah, you get a good look at it here. But I think those are the major things from this article. Mario Kart World started 8 years ago on Switch 1 and was intended as a Switch 1 game, but it was always a bit of a struggle to work technically. So when Switch 2 came along, it was just a natural transition, and it's been in development for Switch 2 for around 5 years. So it's not like they just shoved it on at the last minute. This is still very much a Switch 2 game with a very healthy life cycle for a game. But 8 years is more than most games would ever get, let alone 5 for there's just one version of it. Anyway, let me know what you think. What are the coolest parts of this article? And are you going to read the whole thing? Thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time. Bye, everyone.